All council members are present except for Councilman Kilby. You say, oh, he's there. Okay.
You're fine.
Okay. If I could get a motion for approval on our previous meeting minutes. Can I get a second? Previous meeting.
Second. Sorry.
All in favor? Right. We have 5 pieces in front of us today. First one is an ordinance authorizing the purchasing agent to enter into a contract or contracts without formality of advertising for bids for the purchase and installation of boulders, a concrete walk, and concrete pad at the Akron water plant and declaring an emergency.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the committee, last year we put in a new 24-inch backwash line up at the water plant. This would allow us to restore the area and also put up some bollards to protect the building up there.
Okay. Any questions from committee members? Any questions from council? All right. Is consent okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Can I get a motion for consent?
Second.
All in favor? Opposed? All right. Next piece, ordinance authorizing Director of Public Service through the Office of the Purchasing Agent without the formality of advertising for bids to enter into a contract or contracts for the purchase of 4 chemical transfer pumps for the Akron water plant and declaring an emergency.
Yes, Madam Chair, we have 15 of these handheld transmitters that this will allow us to do the maintenance on them that we need to do on an annual basis. We send about half of them out to get fixed. They give us loaners, and we just grind through it and make sure that they're working properly. And this will be for the year. Consent would be fine.
Okay. Any questions from committee? From council? All in favor? Opposed? Okay, next piece. Ordinance authorizing the purchasing agent to enter into a contract or contracts without the formality of advertising for bids for a 1-year maintenance agreement with the Itron for the existing handheld AMR water meter reading field collector units and declaring an emergency.
Yeah, that was the previous ordinance. I think we're on chemical transfer pumps now.
Okay. Questions from committee? Oh, I'm sorry. He's done. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the ordinance that you just put on the consent agenda. Should be.
It's 2 of them?
No, it should be item number 6. No, number 7. No.
That's just 6.
Number 5.
Yeah, 6 is
4,
different.
5, and 6.
We might have gone out of order. I think we're on order. We should be on item number 5 now. We went out of order, I think.
No, we did
didn't.
5.
No,
We did 5. We did 4, then we did 5, now we're on 6.
We did the chemical transfer pumps. We did that already.
Yeah, we did that.
Okay. Was I here?
You just took number 6 out of order.
We didn't ask a whole lot of questions.
Yeah, there was no
All right,
questions
was I here?
asked. Yeah,
She's right.
Yeah,
We did the
first and
chemical
seconded.
transfer pumps.
Okay, these are our handheld meter readers that we use to check our ERTs, our encoder receiver transmitters.
Okay, any questions from committee? Okay, Mr. Mobian?
I believe these are the handheld things that you go around the homes and you get the amount of usage from the street?
We use them to verify what comes out of the trucks to drive around.
Okay.
This is to verify those readings to make sure that they're accurate.
Okay.
We use these portable, they're like portable handheld.
Yeah. This is one of the companies that we learned about at NLC. I don't know if you guys, yeah, okay.
Any other questions, council? Is consent okay?
Yes.
Can I get a motion for consent?
Motion for consent.
Can I get a second? All in favor? Opposed? Okay, item number 7, offered by Councilman Neal. Ordinance expressing council support for the integrated planning and new affordability consideration for water and declaring an emergency. I'm going to turn this over to Councilman Neal. It's his piece of legislation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This piece of legislation really complements the work that council and especially the administration has been doing as we try to find ways to reduce the costs of our CSO project, but more importantly, try to reduce the cost to our citizens. We know that the federal government requires that we use median income as the mode of setting the rates. This piece of legislation, with our colleagues from across the country, I sit on CED, which is Community Economic Development Board. This piece of legislation acknowledges that we need to look at socioeconomic factors and when it comes to determining these rates. And it urges Congress to acknowledge that so that we can adjust how we set our rates. So this piece is kind of lengthy. If members want to take time to read it, but in a nutshell, it complements the work that we've been doing with our integrated plan, and on the fees that are set is asking that we look at the socioeconomic determinant factors. I was asked, well, how would we determine those factors? It's easy. 100% of the schools in our city are on free lunch program. The HEAP qualifications that we have, and other socioeconomic determinants that we use throughout this city to determine who needs services, or what we would look at, or what Congress would also look at in addressing this piece of legislation. So with that, there aren't any questions. Just time is fine if people have. Yes, sir.
Well, just, the city has already, since I've been here, been talking about this and
Yes,
challenging this.
Yes,
You know,
sir.
the formula that is used to determine median income. Is
That's
right?
correct.
So you're trying to support that and complement what the city has been doing, or is this something new?
No. If you said, I said this piece of legislation complements what we've been doing here in our city. This right here is, we're acknowledging, whenever we go to NLC, if you sit on a federal advocacy committee, that's where legislation is formed that is taken to Capitol Hill. And for anybody that's going on during the month of March, on that Wednesday, we always go to Capitol Hill and we lobby for the needs of cities. This piece of legislation, if you read through it, it says that we support our fellow members of NLC, and with this piece of legislation requesting that Congress allow us to use social economic determinant factors in setting the rates. Right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Moore, the indicator that we have to use is median income.
2%.
Yes. So, you know, this would allow us to have more flexibility and lower the rates that we charge our citizens.
Is this consistent with what the city's been doing? Is that?
It is consistent. I think what he's saying is there are going to be some other factors that potentially Congress could give us the ability to use other than just median income. So this could be beneficial to the city.
Okay. So,
Ms. O. Madam Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Moore, I guess the way we're doing this, you know, the cost of the project we pretty much know. The only question is how we're going to pay for it. Now, I guess my question is this, like if we're allowed to use different criteria to set the rates, and it's less, does that mean we have to have more time to do this? Is that what would the ultimate consequences of that would be? Or, I mean, because the cost is the same. It's not, I don't think we're going to be able to lower the cost of the project. So if we're allowed to use other criteria, does that mean we're going to have, and it's lower, we can't charge as much, does that mean we're going to have to just have more time to do this?
It would certainly have to either change the people that are actually paying the bill, the breakdowns of the bill, or the length of time in order to pay for it. You have to, if you were charging other people different rates, then the remainder would have to pay more. So you would either shift the burden around, or you would have to extend the time.
Yeah, we don't have any differential now. Everyone pays the same rate. I
Correct.
guess, except, I guess it's more for commercial, or isn't that true? There's a higher rate for commercial users, or it's a lower rate?
It's a different rate, a different rate.
It's low, it's a different rate, okay. So, if that's the case, and I'm just playing the devil's advocate, we don't know. If the Congress passes this and we are allowed to use different criteria, then we could have a differential, like if you're under a certain income, you can pay less than someone that is at a higher income. That could be one consequence, correct?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
But I would just say that any tool that we're offered, we should at least investigate and look at, because the rates are what the rates are.
And so this would help us be influential at the national level with the decisions, because we'd be joining with the other cities through the National League of... Right. Okay.
Just for clarification, this came over as a resolution, not an ordinance. Okay.
It is on the...
Right.
Thank you. And this is directed at Mr. Moore. The HDI, I believe is what it is, that homeowner cost that we're striving to get to, that 2%. The formula, I know a couple years ago whenever we first started talking about the integrated plan and how this was calculated, it included, and I don't know if it's within this or not, but it included all of our customers as opposed to just the city of Akron. And so, I know developing these formulas can be kind of dicey, but I don't know if they've changed that or not, and that's something that needs to be considered as well, perhaps within this.
Yes, 2% of income in Hudson is a little different than 2% of the income probably for most of Akron. So there is that problem with the existing formula. If this would give us a vehicle to kind of look at that and examine it and make it as fair as possible, that would be a wonderful thing for our residents and our ratepayers.
And also for council, as we all are aware that in essence what we're doing here and it seems as though that the federal side is not as quick as we would like in terms of recognizing the integrated plan that was introduced under President Obama in terms of, going from gray to green is basically what it is. And does it make sense to do that? In essence, what we're trying to do is we're trying to delay the inevitable in terms of eventually increases down the road. And by going and working with the EPA and so on and so forth, and these calculations, I think they're goals. Unfortunately, and if you recall, a couple years ago, the city had done those calculations, and we brought it down to even the census tract and how expensive it was for some of those folks within those census tracts. It was absurd, not even close to 2%. And so, and I know in the past we've passed ordinances and resolutions and trying to get this cost down as much as we possibly can. But I would suggest that perhaps we look at, the sponsor said that take time on this thing, maybe adding that as part of the whereas clauses in terms of that calculation could be one piece of it that needs to be analyzed and looked at as well, because that is a problem. And we have been reducing cost with the EPA. A couple years ago, if we recall, that we were able to reduce it significantly based on what we originally submitted and then what we eventually was permitted to build. So, thank you.
So you're okay with time?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, second, a motion for time? Can I get a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Number 8 is resolution offered by Councilman Neal, requesting the administration to enact a lift-up program as part of the comprehensive plan to provide water to those residents who need financial assistance and declaring an emergency. Mr. Neal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, as members of the Public Utilities Committee and as council will understand, we've been working along with the administration since we've passed the rates increases to find ways to find relief for our residents. We were approached by a gentleman, quite a few folks, but a gentleman who's here today who will give some comments, Mr. Carter, asking us to consider the HEAP certification as a way to provide relief to some of the residents. Presently, we give relief to those who are homeowners. We do not give relief to those who are renters. This lift up, this piece that comes in for lift up, and lift up stands for Local Interventions for Financial Empowerment through Utility Payments Initiatives. It complements what the administration is doing, what's happening with United Way, what's going on in Councilman Freeman's ward, what hopefully will be going on in my ward, where we're setting up these economic empowerment centers and using these social indicators to connect people to these programs to help them with their financial position. This Lift Up program is where the city having the utility payments and seeing how people are making their payments or not making their payments, uses that information to plug them in to support services, to help them connect them with services that can help them better utilize their finances, or find out if there is just a shortfall in their income. Whatever services we have, we would connect them with. Right now, we have the Akron Cares program, but it's using all of those indicators to better service our constituents. This legislation is just acknowledging that, asking the administration to act on it. Most of you have had information on the Lift Up program for the past, well, since we've been on break now, a month and a half. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at it. I would like to say, again, this complements what we did back in May of 2016, where we passed a piece of legislation, again, asking the administration to take a look at the HEAP program and its qualifications, and if we could extend that to renters. The challenge that we had at that time was, again, we offer it to homeowners but not to renters because we do not have an asset to attach it to. And hopefully I'm not convoluting this, but this complements this lift up piece, and if I may, I'll give this. Again, like I said, hopefully I'm not confusing anyone, but this is supporting documentation for the Lift Up program and how it connects to the HEAP program. Lift Up can be utilized for any of our citizens that are having problems using their water bills. And if you looked at the information that was passed out a couple weeks back, it explained how other cities implement the program. Of course, once someone goes through the Lift Up program, we'll know their financial situation and we can plug them into services. In connecting to the work that we've been doing over the last year and a half regarding HEAP, if you look at the notes on how the city could potentially implement the HEAP assistance program, it starts at, one, looking at the numbers that the city stated. Presently, we have 612 homeowners that qualify for HEAP at a cost to the city of $124,000. That was based on 2016 numbers. Don't have 2017. Presently, anyone that signs up for water doesn't sign a contract with the city anymore. We used to do that. They just bring in their deed to their home, Someone that qualifies for HEAP presently receives a 50% discount on their sewer bill. Presently, renters that qualify for HEAP don't get the discount because there's no asset to connect. This here is just a suggestion of how we can, as a city, implement the HEAP program. Number one, renters that qualify for HEAP and provide a valid HEAP certification letter to the city's water department would be allowed to receive the HEAP discount on their water service. This would mean that there would be no administrative cost to us as a city on qualifying people because we would just use their HEAP certification letter. That person would have to provide their letter as well as a certificate of their current lease and not have any outstanding balances with the city's water department. In that the city's policy is to keep the water bill in the name of the property owner, the HEAP qualifying tenant will be the first on the water bill with the property owner or landlord as second, or the grantor of the loan, says loan or the water bill. If the HEAP qualifying renter should fail to pay an outstanding balance, the property or the landlord will be responsible for the outstanding balance, which would be adjusted to the pre-HEAP discounted rate. Residents that qualify for HEAP and default on keeping their water payments current will not be available for discounts on their water bill or support from Akron Cares program until they complete a city-sponsored or approved lift-up type program, which is a local intervention for financial empowerment through utilities payment initiative course. Now, the question is, how could this be paid for? If you look at the documentation that came out a month and a half ago, it showed ways of savings on the program. And I'm looking at Mr. Freeman, and I need to give credit to you, sir, because I don't know if you remember, you actually went to this class and gave me this documentation. You said, hey, I think you should take a look at this. But the way other cities have saved money is, one, they saw a 50% decrease in termination fees, so that cost is wiped out or cut in half. There's an increase in their cash flow because through this program, people have to stay current with their bills. If you remember, we're writing off almost $1.5 million a year on water bills. And based on the past discussions that we had, we don't know if that write-off is because of, we don't know why. But if half of our residents rent, and I don't know what the indicators are of those who are on HEAP because we weren't able to get those numbers, just by improving their situation, we can improve the cash flow that comes in through the water bill. And then lastly, just the overall reduction of outstanding balances. If anybody knows about owning a business, you can have $100,000 in receivables, but it's no good until it's in your hands. Right now, we have $8 million total that we have written off, but we can't touch it. If we can decrease the amount of our outstanding balance, just the increased cash flow should help us to be able to pay for this program. So I bring this in because this is supporting the lift-up resolution that's coming in, which basically supports the resolution that some of you have that we brought in back in May of 2016, where we've been continuously working to see how we can assist those who are most economically challenged in our community. But the advantage with the resolution before you, the lift-up resolution, is this. That program can help anybody. You know, there's folks that make six figures that can't budget their money, aren't paying their water bills. We put them through that program. You know, we may connect them with who knows what program. It may just be a financial management course like that's going to be opening up in Mr. Freeman's ward. Or it could be something, one of the United Way programs. So, Madam Chair, that's the nuts and bolts of it.
Any questions from anyone? You're okay with time on this as well? Okay, can I get a motion for time? All in favor?
Aye.
If nothing else is in front of us, we are adjourned.
only about an hour behind. Maryland rules.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, our next committee is Rules Committee. And then Economic Development, followed by Budget.
I would like to call the Rules Committee to order. Council members present are Councilwoman Amobian, Councilman Freeman, Councilman Hoke, and Councilman Fusco. Are there minutes from may I have approval to the minutes from the previous meeting? I have a motion and a second on the minutes. Thank you so much. All of those in favor of passage of the minutes signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, the minutes pass. Today before us, we have a resolution recognizing January the 16th, 2018 as the National Day of Racial Healing, acknowledging the racial healing efforts of certain communities.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, there's some rules that haven't been dealt with on the old agenda.
I apologize. We'll take time. And I have a recommendation for time on the old agenda. Is there a second? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Seeing and hearing none, we will take time on that. Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Rules, we have a resolution before us recognizing January the 16th, 2018 as the National Day of Racial Healing, acknowledging the racial healing efforts of certain community institutions and encouraging all citizens of Akron to actively promote racial healing throughout the duration of 2018 and declaring an emergency. The sponsor of this piece of legislation, I believe, was Councilman Neal. Seeing that he is not in the room, is there any comments from the committee? Councilman Fusco.
Yes, I do believe that we had passed similar piece last year,
We did.
and I'm not adverse to seeing a second one. I'd just like to hear from the sponsor in terms of, I assume he's on the grounds here, he's in the building. I'd like just to hear from him.
Are you asking for time till we can locate him? Okay. Then temporary time will be granted for you. Is there anyone else that has a comment? Well, we have a motion for temporary time. Is there a second? All in favor? Any opposed?
Temporary means that we'll wait for the council member to show up.
I think what we will do is hold on this because he isn't here. We can probably do it next week. It would be the 16th. So, temporary time. Are you opposed to that, Councilwoman?
Yeah, we're not back until the, 22nd?
Oh, that's true. Well, I don't think we're a little bit behind schedule right now. I hate to have us sit here and wait for the sponsor. So we'll have to put it on temporary time. And there's been a motion and a second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, we could see what happens tonight. Okay, right. This evening, you just read to make that announcement. All right, is there anything else to come before us?
Are you taking temporary time till this evening?
Yes,
Okay.
we are. Anything else to come before the committee? Hearing and seeing none, motion to adjourn. Second? We are adjourned. Thank you.
What was it? What's in there? Oh, okay, got it. Huh? Well, I'm just telling you how certain councilmen respond. Who is in charge of economic development? Oh, no. Hey, I got to turn my mic.
This one?
I don't want to hold him up.
I'd like to call Economic Development Committee to order. With all members present, Sims, Swirsky, Kamer, Hulk, Milkovich. Can I get a motion to approve November 13th meeting minutes? Can I get a second? All in favor? All opposed? Thank you. We have one piece before us. Item number 11, 2018, approving the project petition for special assessment for special energy improvement project related to the acquisition, construction, installation, improvement of certain public improvements in the city of Akron, Ohio, in cooperation with the Akron Energy Special Improvement District, approving the necessity of that project, determining to proceed with the project, levying special assessors for the purpose of paying the cost of the project, approving a cooperative agreement and a special assessment agreement related to the project, and declaring an emergency. Thank you.
Happy New Year, Madam Chair and members of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. Welcome.
I'm going to actually pitch it to Brad Beckert, who's going to go over briefly the finer points of the project. We also have Chris Burnham here from the Development Finance Authority, but I'll give it to Brad if it pleases the committee.
Thank you. Ms. Beckert.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Essentially, this legislation gives the city the opportunity to level special assessments on the project. The project will be the PNC building, which is downtown, and they're going to do energy retrofits to their building. What this is essentially is this is a pass-through so they can put it on their property taxes, this assessment, and the Development Finance Authority is actually the entity that's going to be issuing the bonds for this project, hence why Mr. Burnham is here today.
So the only other thing I would add to that is in a nutshell, one of our largest buildings downtown is going to be getting an energy retrofit to become more energy efficient. We, the city, there's no cash in the deal from us. In fact, there's a small fee that's paid back to the city. And in exchange for that, the owners of the PNC building are able to take advantage of PACE bond funding, which is a very attractive funding mechanism for owners in large projects like this to be able to do energy efficient retrofits, which I can invite Chris to come up and talk a little bit about should the committee have any questions about PACE bond funding. But again, it's a great thing. This is why this council took that leadership step to create the ESID last year, why we have worked in partnership with Summit County to expand it, because it allows building owners and developers to take advantage of the PACE bond funding in a way that doesn't have us putting money into the deal, but in fact, lifts up energy improvements with more attractive financing.
So did you have someone else who wanted to?
I think Chris is here to answer questions, but I invite Chris to come up to the podium if there's anything he wants to add. If not, we're happy to answer questions. Yep.
I'll just say thank you. It's nice to be here. We've been working on this for many months. It actually stands for Property Assessed Clean Energy. It's a new part of the Ohio Revised Code. It's completely non-recourse to the city. The boilers in that building have been there since 1966. Many of the light fixtures as well, and those are the things that are going to be retrofitted. It's going to make it a lot more efficient, cost-effective to run, hopefully to pass along to the tenants. And we should close. We have a companion piece of legislation at the county. We're kind of pushing to get this closed by the end of the month so he can get all the construction done in 2018. That's it.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? So we've had a little detailed conversation earlier today that the ESET, we've already established that. So this is really about the assessment over the next 17 years. Just an awesome opportunity, I think, from an economic development standpoint. One of the things we talked about, too, I don't think we have much clarity on, we're talking specifically about the PNC building, but there will be other opportunities for folk who might want to be a part of the ESIT, and kind of wondered how that worked.
Sure. So the answer is yes. This council also approved, when we created the ESIT in Akron initially, but there are other communities, obviously, that instead of recreating their own ESID, we can expand the one we have. And so that was legislation that the council also passed last year to allow for other communities or projects to petition to join the ESID. So there's an ESID board that has council representation on it, and they make the determination, as well as the mayor, who can come in and who can't. But really, it's not about can't. These are great projects. It's really the developers and the building owners that are taking on the risk in terms of repayment of these things through the special assessments. We want to make it easier for folks to use the PACE bonds and improve energy efficiency. So truly, this is the first, but certainly not going to be the last project that leverages the ESID and that ability to use the special assessments to repay a PACE bonding. It can get more complicated from there, but it's simple to say that we have one ESID in our area that can be expanded based upon need, so that folks can leverage these special assessments and the ORC and these PACE bonds to do energy-efficient projects to their buildings. Is that helpful?
I think so.
Okay.
So just let me follow up with that. So to join the ESA, do you have to be in a certain proximity to the original project, or can there be more than one in the city?
So I'm going to look at Chris, but my recollection is that no, it does not need to be contiguous.
Yeah, one of the neat things about it is now that it's established in Akron, we can do an energy special improvement district anywhere in the city of Akron. It doesn't have to be contiguous to that site. So if there was a property on Gilchrist Road, for instance, and warehouse plant or something, we could do it.
Any other questions before I ask another one?
Just, so how would someone who is, say, a business person finds out about this, a developer, who would they talk to? Are there any criteria that that you could say that would, could a small business do this too?
Certainly, I don't think there's any.
Who's it aimed for? Who are you looking for to?
Well, there's a couple ways of answering that. We have a financing mechanism called the bond fund. It has a rating. So this project we're taking out to the bond market. We won't fund anything in that bond fund unless we're pretty confident the assessments are going to be made and the bondholder will get repaid. The threshold for that's probably $1.5 million. Less than that gets problematic. We're working with the county and NOPEC and have some other ideas of how we might do a smaller loan fund, but we haven't capitalized it yet.
To answer your other question, Councilman, if folks are interested, they could certainly contact the Mayor's Office of Economic Development, and we can initiate the conversations. But ultimately, the ESID board governs the process.
When the city did our PACE bonds a few years ago, we actually used our savings from this building and the city center in order to start to repay those, which is really what they try to look at. Can the savings offset the bond cost?
Right. You have to do something called I don't know what it stands for, Brett, ASHRAE audit. There has to be an audit or an equivalent audit that someone like the K Company, for instance, could come in and do and calculate the future savings from doing the efficiencies, which you capture to pay off the debt.
So just two questions that kind of go together. So if a new party joins the ESID, do they have to identify their own funding, or do we do similar to what we've done here? Go ahead.
Bracken, there was another lender that looked at this project last year from out of state named Greenworks. They do stuff nationally. There's a group called PACE Equity. So there are other lenders that'll do things. There's a project in Barberton right now that one of those companies is looking at that's in about the $750,000 range. So there's a lot of ways to bring the capital, given this new mechanism.
Final question. Yep. So not that I expect PNC to, or the owner of PNC, the building, to vacate, but just in case they sold the property, that this assessment transferred to the new owner.
Yeah, I believe it stays on their property taxes, so it'll transfer. It has to repay the bond. Yes.
It's a covenant that runs with the property.
Okay.
Yes. No recourse to the city either.
Yes.
That would be my
We are not on the hook, yeah.
Thank you. Any more questions from the committee? Is consent agenda okay?
Yes, please.
Can I get a motion for consent?
Motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Well, it's consent agenda. Thank you. There's nothing else coming before us. Economic Development Committee is now adjourned. Thank you.
Budget and Finance will meet in 1 minute.
masterfully done.
What else they came up with? They originally were thinking first name of August, but somebody else already grabbed it, so. Things went well, yeah, everything went well. It's all good. I'd like to call the Budget and Finance Committee meeting to order. For the record, all members are present. I have a motion to accept the minutes from the last meeting. Motion and a second. All in favor? Opposed? All right, we have nothing on our old agenda. We have one new item. This is an ordinance authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract or contracts with United Way of Summit County to implement the 2017 Financial Empowerment Center grant from Bloomberg Philanthropies Cities for Financial Empowerment Fund and declaring an emergency.
Hello, good afternoon, and Happy New Year. Again, Budget and Finance Committee passed the agreement to allow us to apply for and accept grant funding through the Cities for Financial Empowerment Fund. We were awarded the 2017 Financial Empowerment Center grant. Basically, $20,000 was awarded to allow us to help launch the first Financial Empowerment Center in the city of Akron. Basically, this legislation, again, now that the grant has already been approved and awarded, this will allow us to pass that $20,000 on to the United Way of Summit County, who would be our social service provider and would actually run the program and implement those planning dollars. So again, this is just allowing us to, through contract or a sub-grant agreement, pass that $20,000 through to the United Way.
Excellent, thank you. Questions? Ms. Amodian?
The total amount of the grant is
$20,000.
Are there additional funds coming?
Yes, with the granting of this award, we are now eligible to apply for a $150,000 implementation grant. Again, this is the planning portion of that will allow us to hire our counselors, get the appropriate training for them, and just again to prepare for the launch of the first FEC.
So you have some indication that the $150,000 is coming, or?
Yes, we will be able to apply for it, and the
But
odds that we would be awarded are very good.
Okay. So that's probably the best they can give you, I guess.
The only thing I would add to that is that the United Way is planning on using its own funds.
Correct.
To stand up the financial empowerment program. So we feel pretty good about the grant, but we know we have funding in place.
Questions? Yes.
So the planning grant is a grant to United Way. Are we still the fiscal fiduciary?
Yes, only a municipality was eligible to apply for the funding, so it's basically a partnership grant. The mayor's office will give guidance and oversee the process. The service provider will be the United Way.
So recently, we heard from Mr. DeVoe from the United Way at the close of NAACP meeting last month, and they were talking about creating satellite economic empowerment districts or expansion of the empowerment piece in Kenmore. Is that part of our commitment? Is that written into the planning grant too?
I'll let Melinda answer the planning grant piece, and then I'll answer the
Again, the planning grant is for the first launch of Akron's FECs. I know that Akron is planning to expand the financial empowerment program.
Yes. So while this grant is specific to the Kenmore Center, the city of Akron and the mayor are making a firm commitment to financial empowerment as part of what we do as a city. United Way will continue to be the service provider, but we absolutely want to seek other centers based on data and need in other areas of the city. So Kenmore is first, but not going to be the last.
Just a follow-up question. Do we see that as an extension of Kenmore or standalones for those various communities?
Standalone. Okay. Now, the services would obviously be similar. Financial empowerment, the model itself is replicable, but it would obviously take on the flavor and the needs of that particular neighborhood.
Last part of the question. Are we married to, not to say United Way is not a good partner, I think they are an excellent partner, but maybe organizations that are more central to a given community as the primary partner?
Sure. So I think at this time, we are locked at the hip with United Way. That is how it has been built out in other cities that have fully implemented the financial empowerment model. They've partnered with their United Way. That is not to say that within centers there aren't other partnerships that come to play. But yes, United Way is our service provider both in Kenmore and as we expand the program.
In United Way, they also will hold title to the building.
Correct. So I think this is a perfect example, not to get way off base, of how the mayor has pushed us to seek partnerships versus us just doing it. So we are a partner on this. We are fully committed to it, but United Way also is holding more than their fair share of skin in the game in terms of holding title to the buildings, putting in their own dollars and resources, staffing it, those types of things. So it's a different model, but we are, again, not the first. There are others across the country that have moved in this direction, and it's similar to the Bank on Rubber City opportunity as well. So it's the financial empowerment centers, but financial empowerment writ large is something that we are committed to doing as a city administration in partnership with United Way.
And it's my understanding too that just because this first center has proximity to Kenmore, this is not just for something in 44314. This is a resource that's going to be available to the city, and not just for our folks. That's kind of been a misnomer that it's been out there a bit.
Amen. I have been forthright that I'm going to be there because I need some help. I mean, it's great for anybody. I'm sure we're going to get people from all over the city, but also from Barberton and other communities because of the location. But again, we see opportunities, and we will seek them to open up other standalone centers in other Akron neighborhoods.
Ms. Amobian?
It is my understanding from the last meeting we had with the representative from United Way that they will bring in, hopefully, partners, agencies or individuals that could be more culturally centered or relevant to that particular community or what have you. So there could be other agency providers that will come in through the United Way.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Hardy, I know you may have been a part of some of these conversations. I think Mr. Segedy has been. I know back when Huntington took over First Merit, they made a commitment to bring in $20 million over a 10-year period. I know there's been community organizations, diverse community organizations working with them to come up with something. It seems like that would complement, or at least there should be some synergy. Do we have any update on, where those discussions are and how we're going to infuse that as this? Because I know that's some type of community economic empowerment is supposed to be some component of the fees that they invest.
Yes, so I don't have a specific update for you today other than to say that my understanding is that Huntington and the new Akron Foundation very much want to align with the goals that the community has set, including this. So I can certainly follow up with them and let them know you and the council would like an update, but also try and provide one myself. But I do know they're trying to align with both the city and the United Way in other community organizations to make sure that they're not duplicating, but rather being supportive, so I can follow up on that.
Any other questions or comments? Would placing this on the consent agenda delay us, or should we pass this out this evening, too? Please.
I think consent would be fine.
Okay, then. So I'll look for a motion for consent.
Move for consent.
Motion and a second. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, thank you very, very much. And with that, we are adjourned. Going back down this weekend.